Hello, hello, hello. Hello, I'm Rick from SuperPy, and on today's tutorial what we're going to talk about is how to make shapes within Spark AR and tween between them. So if you can see at the moment I've got my mask here, and as I open my mouth we see this kind of blend effect between the two. So usually how we would go about adding different channels to shapes in Spark AR is usually we'd use a different image processor. So Figma, Sketch, Photoshop, we'd make an image in there and put it into our textures. However, we don't have any textures in here at the moment because we can't tween or go between each of these when I open my mouth. So what we're going to talk about in today's tutorial is how we build shapes in Spark AR using the patch editor and then tween between them. So the first thing that I've done is I've just started a very basic project. In here I have a face tracker that looks like this, and within that face tracker I've got a face mesh. The face mesh is just slightly further out onto my face, so you can see there's kind of a difference between the two, 0.04 in there. And then the mesh has a material on it, and that mesh is a flat material and a face tracker. Now what we might have done in the past to actually add shapes within our face is we could go and actually download the face reference assets and basically make something on here to say maybe we have some circles over here, we have circles on the eyes and circles over the mouth. And then what we could do is go back to Spark AR, put it as a texture and then use it as an alpha channel. Now at the moment if we have anything in the alpha channel, if we turn it on, there's no texture in here at the moment. So how do we draw shapes in Spark AR? Now what we need to do is actually do this in a kind of different way. We're not actually going to use any textures at all. Instead, we're going to make them using the patch editor. So I'm going to turn my alpha channel back off. And instead, what we want to do is we're going to open the patch editor. So I'm going to go to View and Show Hide Patch Editor. Now, at the moment, there's nothing in here. What I'm going to do is have my texture. Well, what do I want to do with my texture? Well, basically what I want to do is cut some bits out of my texture. So at the moment, maybe just the eyes and the mouth. So instead of it being the full texture being exactly the same as a face tracker, instead I want to cut things out. So first thing I'm going to do is actually add my texture here in my material to Spark AR and into the patch editor. So here it is. And usually what I'd want to do in here is basically say, well, my face material, my texture should be the same as the texture of the face tracker. So I'm going to take my face tracker texture in here, and basically what we have at the moment is we have a line going between the two. So we have the same as what we had to begin with. Now what I can use in here is something called mix. Now if I right click on the patch editor and select mix, now the first thing I'm going to do is take my face tracker and I'm going to pass it into this first channel, this box here, and then out the other end I'm going to join these up. Now at the moment we get the same thing as before, and what we have is this mix between the face tracker and 0, and the alpha is basically 0 too, which means this mix is going to be just listening at 100% to this first one. Now if I change this number between 0 and 1, let's say 0.1, notice it's kind of started to fade out, and if I increase this number, as we kind of increase it further and further, it's basically changing the opacity of this. So if I go all the way to 1, basically I don't have a mask anymore. Now what I want to do eventually is basically cut certain bits out of my face based on this number being either 0 and 1. So 0 is full, I have this full mask on. 1 is of course, goes away. But what I want to do is actually cut bits out. Now what we can use is a tool within Spark AR called Signed Distance Fields, SDFs. Now, if you right click, you might have seen this in some of the material here. So in shaders, we can go down, there's this thing called SDF operations, signed distance field things. Now, generally what I've found online is there isn't really many great tutorials on this. So I actually want to make a good one to actually explain this in a better way. So what I want to do is actually cut bits out of my face, which kind of sounds a little bit evil, but let's go with it for now. Now the first thing I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to go over here and right click, and let's say I want to cut out this eye. Now to pick that, I want to use maybe a circle or a square or an ellipse because I might want to make it a little bit wider than it is tall. So I'm just going to type in SDF ellipse. Now here, it basically gives me an ellipse, a center point, and how the half size is in both the X and the Y direction. Now if I just start typing some numbers in here, we can just put it in a certain place. Now if I suddenly just pass this in at the moment, we basically get this being quite bright. Now what we actually want to do in here is basically cut out a certain area. Now the way that we do this using SDFs is not directly straight in. What we can do instead is right click and type in stop. Oh no, we're not doing stop, we're doing step, not stop. So we're going to do step in here instead. And what we can do in here is basically tie this into this first bit and then use this bit in here instead. Now this kind of looks the same because this circle is exactly the same as my head. But what I can do is start changing the numbers and say, instead of this being the half size being 0.5 all the way across and all the way up and down, instead I can start changing these numbers. And if I change this to maybe 0.25, notice it's cut out half of my head in the X direction. If I change that number again, 0.25, it's changed. So it's just a mini circle, and we can see at this top section, instead of this being the full mask instead. Now what I can start to do here is start to maybe like cut out the eye instead. So I've got some numbers that I've written down from before. I'm just going to change these numbers to, rather than 0.5, 0.333. That's shifted over, if you notice. We want to move it slightly up. So I'm going to use 0.375. So now this is kind of over my eye. And again, I want to make this a little bit smaller. So maybe something like 0.12 and 0.1. So now I just have my eye cut out. Now, obviously what I could have done here is say, well, this could have been a texture. I could have drawn it in a certain place on this texture that we have here and basically imported it. But what I can do using SDFs is I can build them up and I can actually tween them as well. So the next thing I want to do is add a second eye. Now I'm going to have this one. I'm going to copy and paste. Now underneath here, I'm going to shift this to the other eye. Now if I just join these up at the moment, this will just overwrite the two. Now I'm going to keep that as it is there. I'm going to move this eye to the right eye, and this is going to be across. Now we want this one to be 0.666. So this other eye is now cut out. But what I want is both this and this. What we can do in SDF is use something called union to join these together. So if I move these two over to the left and right click, I can do an SDF space union. And what this means is I can put SDF1 in here and SDF2 in here and pass the output in here. So now I get two eyes appearing like that. Now, of course, what I want to do is cut out the mouth as well. So if I'm going to open this up, I'm going to move this over. Let's cut out the mouth. Now, same thing, there is other shapes that I could use in here. So shaders, if I scroll down here, there's other things such as, you'll see quite a few things in here that you might recognize, such as ellipse, half plane, polygon, rectangle. Of course, my mouth is just going to be a circle. I'm going to use ellipse again. So my ellipse, this center point is 0.5. I'm going to move it slightly down to 0.7. And this width, I'm going to use a 0.15 and 0.075. So this is going to be the mouth. Now what I want to do here is use my eyes and my mouth. So I've got two eyes in here, and I can also use another union. So SDF union, let's put this two eyes in here and the mouth going in here and join them up into this step. So now what I get is my eyes and my mouth cut out, and you can kind of see at this top here, this, again, I could have done this as a texture. Now, one thing that's really good about SDFs is I can actually mix and blend these together really, really nicely. So for instance, if I want to take this and actually when I open my mouth, then maybe mix it into something else, a different shape, I can do this really, really easily, which I can't do with textures on its own. So what we're going to do is move these three over a little bit. And instead, underneath, we're going to add in a SDF circle. Now this circle is just going to be basically filling my face. Maybe I want to change the radius a little bit later. But between this, I kind of want to do something that looks kind of like what we did with mix. I want to go between this 0 and 1 and kind of blend these shapes into a different shape. Now what I can do in here is right click, and I can find in SDF something called mix. So an FDF mix, hard to say, kind of similar to what we had up here. So what I can do in here is basically take what I have right now, pass this in as the first one, and I want to mix this between something between what I have right now and a full circle. So I'm going to take this one in here and pass this in instead. So what I get now is the same because my mix is at 0. It's at the first one at 100%. But if I want to change this number to something like 0.1 and then 0.2, you can see up here, especially my face is starting to blend in 0.3, 0.4, and so on, all the way up to 1, which is again my full mask. Now, of course, what I can do on this number is actually do some interaction with this. I don't need to type this in and change it myself, but instead I could do it on some face interaction. So I'm going to move this over here, and underneath we're going to change this mix number by taking this face tracker, going to drag this in. On the face, what do we want to do? Maybe something like how much the mouth is open. I'm going to right click and do mouth open. Which face do we want to put in? This face, my face. And then these two things here, is the mouth open, yes or no? But the second one is how open, between 0 and 1. If I connect this up to the SDF mix, what I'll get now is this kind of there we go. We can see, especially at the top as I talk, this is starting to blend in. Now, of course, what I can do between here and here, and you can notice this change really quickly, is add a little bit of delay in here too. So I'm going to take these 4 down here, just move them over. I'm going to right click and use something called an exponential smoothing. So this basically doesn't flick really quickly. Instead, it will actually smooth over kind of a shorter period of time. So I'm going to pass this one in here. So we've got 200 milliseconds pretty much, and then use this one and pass this in here. And once we send it to the Spark AR player, we can test it on our phone as well. So there we go. As I'm talking, it kind of fills in. Now, of course, what we can do once we've tried this out is actually deploy this to Instagram or Facebook camera and try it out for ourselves. We can send it to other people and see how it looks. But what we've done is without any textures whatsoever and just using the patch editor itself, we can actually just draw shapes and textures very, very easily and blend them together.